Welcome to Quilting's first reality show. Yes. Unscripted and live with Susan Smith. Yes.
Hello and welcome. I'm Susan. You're in my studio, Stitched by Susan, and today I'm working on another whole cloth baby quilt. This one is a little different from my others. I often do some kind of feather motif across them. This time I'm doing something very floral, and it's directly inspired by the fabric that's on my backing. So if you're interested in how I process that and how I sort of came up with the idea, stay tuned. These whole cloth quilts are such a great way to make a very quick baby gift. Most often I do them with a piece of fabric on the backing and a piece of fabric on the top, but today I have a little tiny variation for you too. So stay tuned for that. Before we really dive into the quilting, a few things. Few people that I want to thank. One is our son Will, who does those opening credits in various voices. You know, today was Yoda, always fun. My husband, Mr. Producer, who is behind the scenes managing all the things, which I could never do on my own. So I appreciate that. Our good friend Dan Unger, who graciously allows us to use his music. And by the way, stay tuned until the very end of the show. Mr. Producer has done actual credits now that roll through the screen. So if you want to catch some of these names, you certainly can. And we just want to acknowledge and thank those people who help Stitched by Susan keep going and start to look polished. Also this week, and this is a biggie, in the last few episodes, I've talked about us upgrading our lighting and cameras and trying to get the best and clearest view that we possibly can. And so here is a photograph of the lights. And you cannot tell from that photograph how truly, truly bright they are. It's very nice to quilt by, a little hard to look into. Anyway, we feel like we're getting this professional setup, and hopefully today we will get such a clear view of things with those better lights. And we've got a different camera loaded on our close-up. So fingers crossed that everything works today. We sure appreciate those of you who support us and help to make this possible. So we do have an easy way to do that. It's a little website called buymeacoffee.com, because you know I love my coffee. And there you can contribute as little as a single $5 donation, or if you wish, you can go for a monthly one. And those contributions just help so much. And I've got to show you this too. Look at this mug. This was sent to me by a viewer, actually two, Diane and Selena. Thank you, ladies. They took my logo off something they were watching online and created the vector image and made me a coffee mug and a water mug, so I no longer have to sip tepid coffee while I'm quilting. Thank you, Diane and Selena. So very, very nice. I got to learn to hold it so you can see it, but that's not where the lid screws on. I don't know. It's confusing. Anyway, buy me a coffee. All the funds that come in through there, we pour directly into upgrading our equipment. So that has been super helpful in getting this new lighting system all set up. So thank you to every one of you who have supported. Who other credits did I have, Dave? Mr. Producer's coaching me here. I think that's about it. So I think we're going to get started quilting, and I'll keep talking about things as I'm going, other places that you can find me, and etc. But I don't want to belabor it. I do want to get going. So one more sip of coffee and we will start loading. So good. Okay, today's project has on the backing a Bonnie and Camille print. Should I move? I'm going to move Stella to the other end, yes? So while I move her, my machine is named Stella. She's a Bernina Q24. She's a sweetheart. Okay, Stella's parked for the moment. So my backing is this lovely Bonnie and Camille print. And you can see it's got these, I would say roses, but multi-petaled roses. And small, tiny little kind of 4 and 5 pointed flowers and green leaves. So sort of keep that in mind, because that is what I'm going to use to inform my quilting on the front. I'm going to create a type of chevron shape and make essentially a broad quilted border within that, using flowers, leaves, and those tiny little flowers to kind of tie it all together. Now this quilt is intended for my brand new grandniece. She's about 10 days old today, and her middle name is Rose. So how fitting is that? Another fun thing on this quilt, I didn't really have enough backing and I wanted to make it a little bit longer. So I actually pieced it. Can you see that? You sure can. So I call this a zipper effect. It's just a way of, without having just one sharp seamed edge between the print and the navy, because they're quite high contrast, it gets this zippery look. And it just allowed me to add a few inches onto the bottom of that quilt. So that's my backing for today. I did lay it out beforehand with my top of my quilt and figure out where I wanted this to land in the quilt as a whole, and then determine where the top edge was going to be. Because I'm going to start quilting up at this end, and I won't be able to tell exactly where the bottom of my quilt will land, right? I can't see that all at one time. So I just put a pin, where is it? There it is. I just put a pin right where I want the top edge of my quilt to be so that I can control where it ends at the bottom. So just trying to think ahead a little bit. So let's get loaded. I'm using my very usual red snapper method to load. So all I've done to prep this is made sure that I have a straight edge here facing me. And I'll point this out too. Notice that this side where my backing is pieced, it's not straight, and I didn't bother squaring it up. And you'll see as I load why that honestly doesn't matter. I don't have to take the time to do that. On a little quilt, it's easy. It's not a big deal. On a big quilt where that's difficult to square up, this is a real time saver. So that straight edge that's on the front, I'm just snapping into place. Or if you don't have red snappers, you can equally pin it into place. But that straight edge helps you line it up along your leader nice and evenly. It is not a selvage edge, so I'm taking care not to stretch it. I want it to lay as flat and smooth as I can. I kind of pin it, hold it with my left hand, and then I just snap this into place once I'm satisfied with the placement. And just like that, the front is loaded. So now I toss the rest of my backing over the rail. I won't go into tons of detail. I have in some other episodes. You can see that I've got my leader kind of wound around. That is just so it ends up in the right orientation to roll onto my take-up bar and be under my dead bar. You'll kind of see it as we're progressing. But that is why that unusual looking roll. And now, I'll show this first. I've made very sure that this is going straight over. It's not veering off to one side or the other. That is critical. When I don't have straight cut edges on the sides, I won't be able to line them up. I have not marked my centering point. What's keeping this straight is that I have it flowing over the rail very smoothly, very straight of grain, and now as I roll up, it's going to pull on straight of grain, and those edges will just get trimmed off when the quilt is finished. Super, super time saver. So now I'm just watching at the edge of my leader for when the far end of my backing is approaching that. And then I will stop and come around Stella and attach this second edge. And I actually keep one of my magnets on this side of my quilt frame, and I put it on the rail just to hold so that while I'm clipping at this end, especially when I have a bigger quilt, that doesn't dislodge and go sliding off. Just a little anchor point. And again, I do have a straight edge on this side of the quilt, but if I didn't, I would just let any unevenness hang off the edge under my snappers and trim it off later. So just like that, I've got my backing attached. And there we are. We're ready to get going. Okay, batting. We're using my favorite, my current favorite anyway, Hobbs 80/20, 80% cotton, 20% poly. I think I'm going to get a scissors, you guys, and trim it a little narrower. I don't like my batting to be wider than my quilt backing. It tangles up, it gets caught in my edges, what have you. Mr. Producer, would you mind handing me the scissors that are right there on my sewing machine? So I'm just going to fold this up into a few layers and trim a quick schnibble off.
I got my moment of fame there on the camera.
It isn't pretty, but it is effective. I will not cut the backing. I've got my batting lifted well away from it. We'll just toss that bit off camera. And the reason I've got this gap at the top is because I'm watching my pin. my pin marking for where I want the top edge of the quilt to be. And I don't need batting much beyond that, maybe an inch past that or perhaps a little more. So Hobbs 80/20, a good multi-purpose batting, very washable, very soft, medium loft, great all-purpose one. Let me grab my top, and I've got a few things to talk about on this. So big picture. We've got this reads as solid grunge fabric that's going to be our top. And I want to do my quilting design across it in a sort of chevron fashion because I think that's an interesting and pretty way to do it. I've done straight stripes too, but I like the chevron, so that's what I chose today. I did a fair bit of pre-marking today, and here's kind of why. Thinking through the baby quilt as a whole, I knew that I wanted my panel of rosy, flowery border to go, my chevron to go through the middle. And so I did pre-mark my chevrons, and I started at the middle. I marked where that one was going to be and then did some marking above and did some marking below. And for placement of the chevrons, I have a kind of shortcut I'm not positive will show on camera well. But I've got my quilt top 42 inches wide, which gave me 6 segments of 7 inches. Okay, so I laid my quilt top out and I literally dropped dots at the 7-inch mark, 7, 14, 21, 28, etc. And I did that in a couple of places. And then I took this little tool, which is a dressmaker's tracing wheel, not the sharp perforated type kind, just a smooth wheel. And I laid this on my table with one layer of batting underneath. And I don't have a ruler here, but I just went down. I went from line to line all the way down and made a crease. Does that make sense? So my lines top to bottom for my chevrons are only a crease made by this wheel. So I doubt you can see it on camera, but it's quite a bit easier than using a marking utensil. And if you don't love marking vehicles, getting out the chemicals that are a marker, it's a great workaround when you have straight lines. So ruler and this little marker. If you have like a Hera marker, which is kind of like a plastic knife, but for sewing, it would do the same thing. Just an easy way to make that subtle, but visible to me as a quilter, mark all the way down. Then I can just lay my chevrons from point to point. Mine being 7 inches wide, I've got a 3-inch slant. So down 3, up 3, down 3, up 3. That's a proportion that looked good to me. And the way I came to that conclusion was I pulled out one of my trusty plexi trial sheets, and I just fiddled with it. I started with 2-inch. At one point I had 4-inch, and I just worked with it until I got a proportion that I thought was pleasing. If your chevrons are wider, you might want that to differ, right? So that's just something you kind of want to work out before you start quilting. When I do these chevrons, I do not always mark all the lines on my quilt, but knowing that I would be talking to you today and maybe a little bit distracted, I did go ahead and mark every line that I'm going to quilt. Just so that I would keep it straight and not miss out on any of them. So for marking, I did use a blue water erasable marker. This is a Leonis brand. And when this posts to YouTube after the live, I will put links for the tools that I used. And I also have this lovely pen, which it's just got kind of a foamy end and a tiny water canister in it. And it's great when you need to erase some of your marking, but you don't want to spritz with water, right? Everything dissipates, or even water on the end of your finger. It's a big droplet. This is very fine, and it's a good way to erase. So I like to have these handy, both the marker and the pen. If you're not familiar with marking, there are kind of two common kinds to me. One is air erasable and one is water erasable. So the air erasable one will fade just with some time. And if you're in a very humid climate, it will fade in a very short period of time, sometimes minutes. So I chose to use the water erasable because I don't know that I'm going to finish this all. In fact, I'm sure I'm not on this episode today. So I want my markings to last. Okay. So that's why water erasable. It will have to be spritzed or rinsed with water to get rid of the pen. I think that's all the marking stuff. I think we're ready to get started basting. I've loaded a kind of robin's egg blue thread. I didn't actually have thread that precisely matched my fabric, but the grunge does have a little bit of shading in it, little bit of grays, a little bit of almost golds in it. And so I chose to use this robin's egg blue. So my typical basting now is to baste up the left side, across the top, and down the right. You can see in camera, I'm sure, that I do not have very much excess on the right and left of my quilt. Generally, I prefer to have more because I like to have something to clamp when I'm quilting. But in this case, I wanted that 42-inch span because it was a nice, easy measurement to work with. And this is the limit of the amount of backing that I had. And in my experience, working on a small quilt like this, you have very little problems with the backing wrinkling up when you're not aware of it, which is why you clamp on the sides to avoid that, right? And so I think it's going to be okay. You're going to see today that I probably will not side clamp at all. I'm going to have to be able to quilt to the edges with my ruler, so I'm just not going to clamp those side edges at all. So let's get this basted. And I've got what we call a darning foot on the machine right now. It is a very small foot, small profile, so I can really see what I'm doing. And I chose that because the florals, honestly, are kind of new to me. It's not a thing I've done very often. This is a reality show, so you guys are going to see me practicing. It is what it is, but I wanted to be able to really see what I'm doing. I'm going to take that pin out of there now. So I am simply basting. I've got a 1/4 inch basting stitch on, and I'm just basting the left, as I said, and then now across the top, and then down the right. So that is securing 3 sides of my working space. I prefer to float my tops, which means the other end of my top is not rolled onto a roller of my quilting machine. It's just hanging down in front of me, floating. However, it is important that your working area does not float around on you. And so this is how we're going to secure it. So left, top, and right, that's 3 sides. And now none of those 3 sides can shift out of place. Did you guys see, by the way, that I found a cute little place to store my thread snips? Right in the handle. Love it. Okay, 3 sides secure, and here comes number 4. My favorite magnets, hardware store variety, clipped right onto the front of my long arm rail. Just like so. So now my working area is secure. It is not going to shift in any way, and I'm pretty confident that this is flat and smooth and will not wrinkle up on the back, even though I don't have anything clamping it from the sides. So I'm going to grab my ruler base and put it on. And we're going to get going on that. I'm curious if any of you have quilted with rulers and if this is something that you like doing. And do we have some questions, Mr. Producer, that we want to chat about while I put this on and get ready? I'm going to get out a couple options for rulers and we'll see which ones work best. All right, what have we got? And I'm going to get me a sip of coffee. I don't have the feed. Okay. Beautiful hot coffee. It's a lovely thing. There's the name. Okay. Jennifer, you taught me a lot. Thank you. Here in Wenatchee, Washington is my sister's here and a quilter too. Awesome, Jennifer. Savannah, would be neat to put the zipper at the top and at the bottom. Absolutely it would. You'd have to put a little forethought into where you wanted it for placement, for sure. But absolutely you could do that. It's a great way when you don't have just quite enough fabric to just extend it a bit. Beverly, I love that you're barefoot, my kind of girl. Yeah, I'm pretty much always barefoot. And Sue, did you make your blouse from the backing fabric? I missed the intro if you mentioned it. It's so pretty. I did not. Somebody else made my blouse. But it does look very similar. You're right. I didn't even think of coordinating like that, so sharp eyes to notice. Savannah, just a reminder that you wanted to speak about the quilt behind you. Good point. And maybe now's a good moment to quickly do that. This pattern is Swoon by Camille Ross Kelly, so the same lady that was the designer of the backing fabric that we're using today. This was a really early quilt in my quilting journey, and there's a funny story behind it. It was the first quilt that I did a significant amount of ruler work on, and I didn't know if I was going to want to keep up with rulers or not, so I had not invested in real long arm rulers. So don't really do what I did, but I'll show you. Some of you might be familiar with this. It's called an add a quarter ruler, and it's got a lip a 1/4 inch from the edge, making it a pretty thick ruler. I did this whole quilt with this ruler. I was crazy. But this I did in my first year of long arming. And the premise of biting off more than you can chew has stood me in really good stead. That's what I did with this quilt too. I didn't have a clue what I was doing with this kind of custom quilting, but I sure learned a lot while I was doing this quilt. So yeah. Okay, any more questions, hon? Here we go. Melissa, be sure that you do not use heat on that quilt top until you've removed all of the blue marks or they will be set in for good. True story, Melissa. You want to wash them out. And I actually prefer to rinse them out, not just spritz, before I use an iron or put them in a dryer or any kind of heat, even probably strong sunshine in a vehicle, like to transport them. True. It is still a chemical. It's good to be aware of that. Kathy, do the red snappers with them rolled back just far enough for the basting cause your machine not to move easily? Makes sense. I think so, Kathy. I fiddled with it a little bit. If you notice, I moved Stella a little off to the side past the thick portion of the red snapper, and then I rolled my snapper past my dead bar, and then I pulled Stella back. That's how I've kind of gotten my workaround. So the thin inner core of the red snapper slides through. I just have to move off to the side to get the thicker snapped portion under. So I've got it behind my dead bar now. Hope that all makes sense to you too. And that's kind of specific to machine brand, by the way, how you have to fiddle with that. Sally, do you have a channel lock on when you go across the top? Most often I do, Sally. Today I did not. Both it's a small quilt and also I just used my dead bar as a guideline. So I just did it by eye. Barbara, sometimes even with my ruler base, I still catch a ruler under my foot. How do I prevent that? It depends a little bit on your machine, Barbara. Really important that you have the proper foot on your machine, which kind of triggers in my mind. I was talking about the darning foot that I want to use to quilt with today. I'm going to have to change feet when I'm quilting with the ruler. So important that you have that thick, chubby ruler foot on as well. And in the case of the Bernina machines and some other brands, you have like a presser foot up, down. Make sure that presser foot is down before you introduce your quilter into your ruling area, into your quilting area, and then you shouldn't be able to get over the top of it anymore. Diane. Selena says hi. These are the two ladies that sent me the mug. She's on the road heading to a quilt shop in Missouri. Awesome.
I think you answered this, but I probably didn't.
Joyce, will you put on a ruler foot? Yep. I sure will, Joyce. Thank you for the reminder, though. I appreciate it. You guys are often good this way. I get talking and sort of forget little things. Bobby, when you were learning, did you learn E to E and ruler all at the same time? I pretty much did. You know, I was very much on my own and self-taught, and there weren't even all that many YouTube videos that I could find. So I just dove into stuff and experimented and tried and found my way. That's how I did it. Gainer. Do not use any detergent on that blue marker, only water. Some chemicals and washing powder can set it. I learned the hard way. Good point. I've not had that happen to me, but good point. I mentioned earlier, my usual method is literally to rinse the quilt. So I will put it through a rinse cycle in my washing machine with just water. That's my preferred way of getting it out. It will become invisible just by spritzing, but I feel like that chemical is still in there somewhere and apt to come out again. So I like to rinse it. Judy, have you ever started the quilting process and wished you had not chosen that particular design? You know, sometimes I have, Judy. I don't worry about it too much. I count that a learning experience because I don't think it's wrong. It's not going to be ugly. I may go and say, I might do that differently next time. So don't get hung up on it for sure. I've done things I wish I'd done differently, but don't get hung up on it. Jan, could you go over what you said about the Bernina? Which part, Jan? Be a little more specific if you would, please, and I will come back to that. And Sue, another tip for rulers, only quilt in the area next to your hand. If you stitch to the end of a longer ruler, the ruler may tip and you'll hit the ruler that way. Yep, we can talk about that a little bit, Sue, too, as we go. Good?
For the record, we are streaming out to 11 countries this morning that have all represented.
Mr. Producer's chiming in here. We are he's counting in the background. We have 11 countries that we're streaming out to this morning. So thank you all for watching. That is so, so cool. Okay, let me grab my ruler foot and we're going to put it on. If you have any more questions, be chiming in with them. And then we're going to get quilting. So this, by the way, is one cool Bernina thing. This is how easy it is to change feet. So my darning foot is on. I flip a little lever, take it off, put my new foot on, flip the lever back in place, and I've got my ruler foot in place. I may end up fully quilting with this one just because I don't want to go back and forth. Okay, so a couple things here and we will get started. You saw me put my ruler base on. Absolutely critical when you're quilting with the ruler because you need a table for your ruler to rest upon. The little nose of your long arm is not big enough. Your ruler will tip and accidents will happen. So it is important to have a ruler base. And someone who mentioned not stitching to the long end, that's true. Stitching where your hand is, that's where it's most firmly held and is not going to shift. That's important. Pause and shift your grip as often as you need to, and you will see me doing that. So I've got a 10 stitches per inch stitch length on, and we're just going to begin. So I'm looking at my the length of my stitching area here, and my ruler is only about 1/4 inch longer than that whole line that I want to stitch. And this is an 8-inch ruler, so I'm actually going to go up one size. I thought this might happen, so I grabbed the bigger one so that I can hold it firmly enough and I can actually stitch that whole line without having to pause. And my rulers, by the way, are by Quilter's Apothecary. Also, when we upload this to YouTube, I'll have a link in the description. So the description is always below a YouTube video. Everyone who's on YouTube has this. Sometimes you have to click see more, but in that description is a link. Jamie Wallen makes these beautiful rulers. I love them because there's multiple ways that you can hang on to them because of this handle. So he has a collection called the Stitched by Susan collection, and in the links there will be a coupon code for 10% off any ruler in that collection. So let's get started quilting. So watch as I hold this handle in all kinds of different ways. And remember, I've got this vertical crease in my fabric. You probably can't see it on camera, but I can, and I'm stopping right in that crease so I get a nice crisp point at the top and bottom of my chevrons. I believe the first whole cloth that I did, which was a pink one, I talked a little more about the spacing of these lines and how I worked that out. So feel free to have a look at that YouTube video. And I do know for sure in my advanced membership, which is a monthly subscription membership, I've done a lesson on doing these whole cloth quilts with a chevron in which I went into a lot of detail about my spacing and how I planned out my designs, how I worked at getting contrast between my different designs and those sorts of things. So if you're interested in finding out more about advance, you can do that at my website. Or in fact, you can send me an email and I'll send you some links that will give you more information on that. Like I said, it's a monthly subscription and there's different lessons and different content that comes out every month. My email address is susan@stitchedbysusan.com. I am taking care, you can probably see this in the big picture. When I'm moving with my ruler, it is pulling the quilt a little bit. I'm not sure how to tell you to deal with that. I'm just being careful of it and sort of letting it reset and get back into place at the end of each of these long lines. That is happening because I don't have a clip on the side. So if it's really bothering you and getting in your way, then as soon as you're through that first line, you could attach clips, but you'd be onning and offing all the time. I'm opting to wing it. I've done this often enough that I think it's going to be okay, but you do whatever comfort level suits you. And I'm stopping my machine at each point to shift my ruler. You certainly don't have to, but you run the risk of bumping it and having it stitch way off into no man's land while you're in the process of realigning your ruler. You may have noticed that I don't have markings all the way to the top edge of the quilt. Again, this is going to be a little longer process than I can finish in one live, and so I want to work my way into the middle of the quilt so that I can show you that floral design that I promised. So some of this upper edge I will actually come back and finish later, but because I've basted these, stitched these chevrons in place, it's not going to shift at all. That's going to work as a form of basting, and I can come back and finish that top edge. I haven't fully decided, honestly, what I'm going to put in there yet. I know some quilters, you know, fully design and plan out, especially when they're custom quilting, before they ever start a quilt. I tend not to. I often do not know what the whole thing is going to hold when I begin, and that's just my style. So as I'm doing here, I'm going to go ahead and start with what I know and what decisions I've made, and then later I'll come back and I'll continue to fill in those ends with what I think at that time suits the quilt. This grouping of kind of 3 stripes, I have planned what I want in there. And I'm going to go ahead and do all that because it's kind of going to be almost a warm-up. When I get to those florals, that's going to be the focal point of the quilt. And I really want to have my game on by then. And I don't know about you, but when I start in the morning, sometimes my control is not really great until I literally warm up. So it's a good way to start with the less demanding bits until you feel like things are flowing smoothly. So that's what I'm going to do. Again, the little plexiglass design boards that I use are really ideal for laying on top of your fabric like this and planning out what you want these stripes to look like, how big you want them to be, what quilting designs you're going to put in them. I just find that invaluable to be able to see through them, see my fabric, see my quilt, and in the case of these chevrons, I'm really considering the proportions of them, the depth of the sweep of the chevron, the spacing of the stripes, and then what I'm quilting within each of them. So I do love those plexi sheets, and they're just from a hardware store, although I do think they're also in my grouping of links that will go up after the show in case you can't find them in a local hardware store. Amazon does sell them. And you notice that some of the stripes are single and some of them have this 1/4 inch echo. This 1/4 inch echo is kind of separating areas, if you will, and you'll see as I get to doing the quilting, I've got something planned for the grouping of 3, and then I've got a larger thing happening right below where I'm quilting now, and that double line just adds some visual separation between some of those elements. And I believe this is the 5th whole cloth that I've quilted on my YouTube channel. So if you want some other ideas for quilting designs or some that are not chevrons, check them out. I've tried to call them all whole cloth so you can search for them. So whole cloth is somewhere in the title. I don't know if I can quilt this next one because of my ruler. No, I can't quite. Let's see. I'm going to advance just a hair. Because I've got my ruler plate on there, I have a little less clearance at the front than I'm used to. So I underestimated that just because my ruler plate is bumping up against my front rail. So I just advanced a little bit. I want to do one more line in here. And then we're going to go back and start filling in the pretties. And I believe I said earlier, but in case I didn't, for this particular design, because I wanted the florals to be the focal point, I started my marking and my design planning from the center. So I first created a very large, very wide chevron sweep in the middle. And then I worked my way to the top and then I work my way to the bottom. And I don't think anything says it has to be symmetrical, same on the top as it is on the bottom. I think that's what I'm going to do, but you certainly don't have to. I just wanted that floral element to be front and center. And we'll go ahead and do the 1/4 inch echo. Then we are off to the races. You can see how the handle on this ruler is so beneficial. I can shift how it is sitting on my quilt top and have different ways to grab it, which is, I feel like, ergonomically sound way of doing things, but also it reduces fatigue. So having just a flat ruler means that you have to hold it with downward pressure all the time. I find that very fatiguing on my fingers. This way I have sort of multiple ways that I can grab it. So I love these straight rulers that have handles. I don't do tons and tons of ruler work in my studio, more straight than curved for sure. And these are just my go-to straight rulers with the lovely handles. I love them. Okay, let's get on to the pretties. So I'm just going to stitch within my basting line at the edge, back up to where I want to begin. And let's talk about these stripes for a minute. So I've made 3 stripes. They're about 1 inch wide. And what I'm going to do is in the center one, this is what I'm going to quilt next, I'm going to do a fine kind of matchstick that's close and will really quilt it down flat. And then I'm going to do something much looser above and below that. So you'll get this broad striped effect, and that is going to repeat all the way down my quilt with other things between it. So let's get those little matchsticks in. Certainly some quilters do this with a ruler. I always freehand mine. That's just my personal choice. When you're close up, 8 inches away quilting it, it does not look very perfect, but the effect of it, you know, holding the quilt down flat in that particular stripe, even if they're not perfect, you still get that great effect. So don't sweat it. If you're trying this freehand and you don't think everyone looks like the one before and after, doesn't matter. And this is going to take a little time. So if you have any questions or comments, let's hear them. Let's see, a few of the things that I should talk about again. Absolutely like and subscribe if you're enjoying this type of unscripted live content. I do these episodes, I try to do them twice a month, where I'm working on a project, usually from loading right to finishing, and most often an edge to edge all over type design. But these little whole cloths have featured quite a bit too. The beauty of, you know, welcoming you into my studio for this kind of live stream is that you get to see things in real time. You get to see how long it actually takes. You get to see how fast I actually quilt, as opposed to, you know, a lot of the sped up stuff that we tend to see on social media. And I get that. I do those things too, because you're trying to, you only have so many seconds, right? And you're trying to show the end point. I get that, but I think it's beneficial to see someone quilting in real, legitimate time, to know how that goes. And then too, things happen on my episodes. Thread breaks happen. I haven't ever had a ruler break. Needle breaks happen. Tension issues happen. And generally, I just stay live and talk my way through it and try to resolve it. And often it's very interactive. You are a great audience. Often viewers will type in comments or ideas or thoughts, and it's really, really helpful. So it's kind of like a little virtual quilting bee. So I'm curious, it would make Mr. Producer feel really good if you would chime in and tell him what you think of the new camera that we've got on the close-up. How is that view for you? And how do you feel about the lighting? Those are 2 things that we have changed significantly since the last time we aired. So we'd love to hear your feedback on how that's reading for you at your end. I did mention that I'm stitching with 10 stitches per inch. That's kind of my go-to. I'm also at this moment using an Isocord 100% poly thread, and it's kind of a robin's egg blue. It's a little bit bluer than this fabric is. I have learned too that I like to have my thread, even when I'm quote unquote matching my fabric, I like it to be a shade darker. It's just a little bit richer looking. So as I didn't have the exact aqua greenish color that's in this fabric, I just spooled out some thread onto it, looked at it in a little pool, and picked the one that I thought made the nicest, richest look. And this is what I chose. Okay, so there's our flattened one. Now we're going to do a really simple and much looser one above and below it, and it's just going to be this wavy line running through the middle. I'm going to do the same thing in the stripe below. These whole cloth quilts, by the way, are a fabulous way to practice right and left directional quilting. So you don't have all four directions to work with like you would in a border that surrounds a quilt. You're limited to just two, right to left and left to right, and it's a good way to practice intentionally getting comfortable with quilting in both directions. Okay, so that's our grouping of 3, and that, as I said, is going to repeat all the way down through the quilt with other things in between it. This next one is 4 inches wide, and I'm just going to do tall loops in it. It's not terribly dense. It's fairly quick. And it's something that I think contrasts nicely with what's above and below it. And I'm going to try to have a loop in the point of each chevron, both top and bottom. Other than that, I have not marked the spacing at all. I'm not too worried about it. I just try to keep an eye ahead when I'm coming close to one of those chevron tips, that I either squeeze them in a little bit or space them out a little bit so that I get one in the tip. And I didn't really make it there. I'm not going to worry about it. I was thinking the other day, I'm going down a rabbit trail here, fair warning. I was thinking the other day about how doctors and nurses and even lawyers call their business a practice. And we all call ours a studio, but I just wonder if we could call this a quilting practice too. Doesn't that seem fitting? I feel like it's less intimidating than you don't. I mean, I guess you want your doctor to be perfect, but as it relates to quilting, I feel like there's less pressure to be perfect about it. It's a practice. Maybe we could start a thing. Hi, I'm Stitched by Susan, and this is my quilting practice. I need to relax. I don't really have to be that close to my stitching, do I? This one, I nailed it right in the middle. So after this one, I'm going to pause for a moment and advance the quilt. Great time for some questions. I will answer as many as I can. So there we are, off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and break thread here. In other words, lock stitch, pull up my bobbin thread and cut it, and I'm going to put a drop of oil in Stella. I did already once this morning, but I haven't quilted in a couple days, and I can just hear her. There's a little bit of rattling going on, which is my clue. It needs a drop of oil. Great, just that easy. All right, let me do a quick wind, and then while I get things stabilized, we'll take some questions. Okay, I'm ready. Do we have questions? Mr. Producer, sir? Mr. Producer's asleep at the wheel. What a guy. He's busy reading ahead is what he's doing, trying to find the good ones. Okay, Kathy, do you ever use the heat erase markers? Sometimes they leave a white mark after applying the heat. I honestly have not ever used the heat erase markers, and so I don't have any experience with that. Dolly, I'm sitting watching and opening and closing my side red snappers to hopefully loosen them up super tight now. They do loosen over time. Perhaps applying a blow dryer to them and warming them would help too. Run them through your dishwasher. They're probably too long for that. Beverly, when I baste around my quilt, I always have puffiness in the center. How do I avoid this? It never lies flat. I wonder, Beverly, about the tension of your thread. Like if your threads top and bottom are pulling up, I wonder if you've overall got too tight tension, both top and bottom. Just a thought off the top of my head. It shouldn't pull up on you like that. Vera, are you saying that you mark your quilt top before you put it on your machine? I don't typically, Vera, but in this case I did. I marked my chevrons in place before I loaded it, because when I've got it loaded, how can I tell where the middle of the quilt is to work my way out? So I started at the middle and marked upwards and downwards from there. Shar, do these rulers work well with sit-down long arms as you hold the material and ruler at the same time? To the best of my knowledge, they do. I don't have a ton of experience with that either, and I tend to go toward the smaller size rulers at my machine just because you've got a much narrower throat that you're working in. So I would have probably stuck with the 8-inch on that one, for example. But yes, they're a good thickness. You know, double check with your machine brand and even the ruler manufacturer. There are definite recommendations for low shank machines and high shank machines and so forth, and I'm not super knowledgeable about that, but you still need a ruler foot for sure and a thick ruler for sure at your domestic machine. Savannah, so are those the Mystical Ditcher and the Mystical Ditcher 2? Oh, great question, Savannah. Do I know? Let me look. Here we go. There's names on them. This is the Mystical 45, this way. This is the long one. And the other is the Mystical Ditcher. I think this is kind of the classic one. And it's 8 inches long, side to side. Mr. Producer says he has put the link in the comments for you, and it will live after this episode as well in the description. Okay. Sally, new camera and lighting are fabulous. Good. I'm so happy to know that. It's a little nerve-wracking, honestly, to go live with all this new stuff at play. But we've, as you know, if you've been watching the last few episodes, we've had various troubles with our cameras and connections, and so we're really trying to overcome that. So good. I'm glad it's working well today. Karen, when stitching between the lines, do you have a tip on how to keep the lines or tall L shape the correct angle? Mine lean sometimes. Do you know, Karen, it might be worth dropping in even some chalk markings up and down just for a visual aid every few inches to keep you lined up, sort of like the guides you might have used in handwriting class, you know, to practice your slant. Well, you might want some straight up ones just to help you visually see that. That's what I would try. Denise, do you find it more difficult to freehand quilt with the ruler foot on? I don't, Denise. In fact, I use it a lot of the time. I don't bother changing it unless I need that visibility for the tiny one. I often just leave the ruler foot on. Pat Boo, everything looks very good for me. I can see really well. I don't have a long arm, so I'd like to know about the technique on a home machine. I quilt on my Juki. Thank you. There are lots of quilters. Angela Walters is the first one that comes to mind. Amanda Murphy is another that quilt at sit-down type machines of different varieties and do ruler work. So there's lots of information out there about that. It's very doable. Absolutely. Okay. Okay. Okay, so Mr. Producer is saying he had asked the question in the chat, are you preferring going back and forth from close-up to side view, or do you like the split screen, seeing the two at once? So he appreciates hearing from as many of you as possible as to which way you like that, which seems more informational for you. So let us know on that. Okay, is that it for comments? I can start stitching? All right. So now we're going back and basting the left-hand side again. So I'm just overlapping the basting that I had before. This is not pretty stitching. This all gets covered up in the binding when it's put on. So I just slap it in there and I trim off the thread ends later. All I want to do is hold the edge of the quilt and the backing firmly together, so there can be no shifting while I quilt. Get rid of the small ruler. Basting to me is an absolutely indispensable part of your quilting. I never, ever, ever proceed to quilting the center of my quilt until this basting is in place, because your 2 layers of fabric will shift. As you add quilting, and there's the fluffy batting in there, it will pull up and distort. So it's absolutely critical to my mind that you baste on both sides of the quilt to hold everything firmly in place. All right, let's get some more lines laid in. So at this point, I'm not going to do all of the detail of that 3-part stripe. That's what's coming up next. I'm going to go ahead and drop to the bottom of it and go ahead and quilt in my chevron lines, just because that's enough quilting to hold it firmly in place, and I can come back and do those details later, right? And I want pretty soon to get on to this rose border, which is the next one coming up. Rose stripe, rose border. It's not really either of those. I don't know what word I want to use. But anyway, that's what's coming up next. And that's kind of the point of this show, so I want to get to that. If you were looking for any easy listening, by the way, I do have a podcast also, and it is called Measure Twice, Cut Once. And you can find all the episodes at podcast.stitchedbysusan.com. And all the past episodes I am in the process now of releasing on YouTube, so that you can find them on my channel, and also so that they're all captioned. So if you prefer to read while it's going on and not only listen. And it's not actually a video, there's just still photos of quilting behind it, but you can listen and you can see all the captioning on my YouTube channel. So just look for the podcast playlist, and they're there. Some conscientious viewer is letting me know that my front magnets are not on, so let's just stop on a point, because you're absolutely right. They need to be on. There we go. I do think, honestly, that they're as critical as the side basting. It's just when I'm talking, I tend to get sidetracked and get out of my habitual things that I do one right after another. I need just a touch more room to be able to quilt the bottom of this chevron. I was looking at that when I advanced it, but I just underestimated it a touch. There we go. We're in business. So this is the bottom edge of my rosy floral section now. And I believe I left that section 7 inches wide from top to bottom, so it's a big one. But this is the focal point of my quilt. At least that's my hope. Honestly, these little whole cloths, because they're small, I do them in baby quilt size. I guess they could be a small lap quilt too. You know, with the fabric. So this one's 42 inches wide and it's about 50 long. They're small enough though that it's a great way to try out something you've been wanting to do. And this border is something I've been wanting to try. I took a class a few months ago called Blooming Botanicals by Beth Ann Nemish. Such a fabulous quilter and teacher. And I've been wanting to put some of the things I learned in that class into practice in a quilt, and I haven't had the opportunity. I tend to do a lot more edge-to-edge quilting. So this one came to mind, and I thought, oh, hey, this is a great opportunity to try out some of these florals. So I'm not committed to a big queen-size quilt. It's not a client quilt, so yeah. The commitment and pressure level is very low. It's a great time to try out something new. Some of the other whole cloths I've done, number 4 particularly, was kind of a sampler of different border type designs. So again, just a great way without a whole, volume of quilting to try out some different border designs that you've been wanting to experiment with. And then also fabulous little gifts. Okay, here we go. Let's talk for a minute before I start quilting, though, on the roses. I've got the side camera on. I do. As I quilt, you'll see, you probably can't see it in this full view camera right now, but I've got these random kind of large circles and crescent moon shapes and little bubbly looking things. All that is some visual guide to me. I looked at this chevron stripe as a whole and I thought, where do I want to put the biggest flowers? Where do I want to put the smaller kind of side profile flowers? Where do I want to drop in some buds, maybe some berries or some of the tiny flowers that are in this backing, the little 4 and 5 point ones? And then I'm going to fill that in with leaves and perhaps some ribbony swirls, whatever I need to do to fill in this 7-inch border. So I am winging this. So you guys, welcome to live streaming. I am totally winging this. Do we have any questions before I go, Dave? Because this is going to take a bit. I'm not going to stop in the middle of this.
Only once you might as well.
Okay, we're going to... Okay. Let me get a sip of my magic elixir, too. Sally, you mentioned that your width is 42 inches. What is your length measurement? Sally, I can't honestly recommend, I think, or recall. Sorry. I think it's about 50. What I sometimes do on these chevron quilts, honestly, is I start at the top and I work my way all the way down, and I'll just call a halt when I'm at the bottoms of points, for example, or something that I think looks pleasing, and it sometimes involves trimming off an inch or 2 or 3 of my fabric, and I suspect that's going to happen again today. So I like to have a little leeway for that, especially if you're not going to pre-mark it all in advance. But today mine is 42 by about 50, might be 52. So. And one more, Pamela, I'm quilting a GFG vintage, Grandmother's Flower Garden vintage, that I got at a flea market. The basting is the problem as the sides are frayed and in the octagon shape. Don't want to cut sides as I like the shape. Any ideas? My best idea is probably going to be use a ruler to hold it in place and to establish a quilting line, whether your ruler is straight or curved. If it's hexagons, it'll be straight edges. And you might have to lose a little bit to get inside of the fraying, possibly. Put lots of pins in to anchor it. Go at it. Okay, you guys. I am seriously winging this. And I don't know if I could say that this is my comfort zone for quilting, to wing it this much. I tend to do, if you're a follower, you know I tend to do edge-to-edge stuff, and most often edge-to-edge stuff that is repetitive. So this is a challenge for me. My goal is just to fill the whole expanse fairly evenly, but get this whole 7-inch border to have something interesting in it. I'm doing kind of jaggedy leaves just because that's what is in the rosy print that's on it. And beyond that, I am just winging it as I go. These are some little buds. Leaves are going to be my friend. I can see that already. They're just going to fill in all the places that I don't know what to do. And how about we use another Beth Ann trick, which is to put in some spirals or twirls that are not necessarily floral, but fill in the space with something complementary. So the roses have a very, in the floral, have a very fluffy center. So, you know, am I managing to quilt it anatomically correct? I doubt it. But that's kind of what I'm basing the center of my flower on, is that very fluffy floral. Another thing that I'm going to add is just another layer of petals, because again, the ones that are in the print, in the fabric, do have multi-layers, so I'm just going to echo around it. Let's get some little ones in here. I'm going to pause for just a second, and I'm actually going to change my stitch length to 12. When I'm doing these tiny flowers, I'm getting a little bit squared off corners. So I feel like if I do a smaller stitch length, that'll lessen that a little bit. So I don't have anything drawn in this area, but I feel like I need something before these little berry type things I wanted to put over there. So I'm just going to go ahead and drop in a couple of buds. Even though I did not have this sketched in my plan. Sometimes you just don't know how full it's going to be. Or I didn't. I thought I had enough things sketched in there to be getting on with, but apparently not. And again, I don't think there were any of these little berry type things in the print, but they're a great filler, and they sure make everything, just kinds of ties it together like it would in a bouquet. So what I was attempting there was a profile flower, but I don't like the look of it, so I'm going to go ahead and put in petals to fill in that upper edge. I just think that's more pleasing. And let's see, now we're going to do another leaf, because remember, they're my friend. And I've got to say, this is not artistry. At this point, not fully satisfied with what I'm doing, and yet I have to look at this and say, you've got to start somewhere. And this is where I choose to start. And I will, whoever it was that asked me earlier, have you ever quilted something and not liked it? This probably comes close to that. So I'm going to look at this and say, oh gosh, I wish I had done that differently. Or next time I'll do it better. But I'm not going to dislike this. And I'm not going to shy away from showing you guys what I've done either. So I will definitely post pictures of this on social media. And I'll post some close-ups of this quilting. And you'll be able to see. There's places I should have had more petals or more flowers. But it's a learning experience and it'll be okay. My favorite parts, I think, are the little buds, honestly. Okay, let's try again to get a little profile kind of flower shape in here. So that we're kind of just seeing half of it, like half of it is tucked out the back. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm just going to look back over it and see what else I should be tucking in. I think we should put in another of the little swirls at this point. And we should get something else floral in. So I guess it's going to be some of the little flowers. How does that sound? Those little guys are cute. We need something up in this end. I guess we're going to continue out a little bit and use our friend the leaf. And there it is. So I will pan slowly over it so you can see it a little bit here. I promise I will post pictures of it too, so you can see. And I'd love to hear your feedback, but I just want you to know that, do you know what? I wonder what happens if I spray it. If it shows up more or less, it'll take the blue markings out. Let's give this a try on one corner. But I started to say, I want you to know that perfection is not called for. You don't have to know how to do everything before you start. Does that make it show up more? Anyway, let's pan over it. So you'll see the blue markings a little bit. There are certainly areas I could have added more detail, but overall, I'm reasonably pleased with that. The blue marks are very distracting, aren't they? Okay, so any comments on that? And while you type in some thoughts, I am going to go ahead and take my magnets off and advance the quilt. Okay, we have any comments? Sue, what BSR mode are you using to do the floral? I have it on 2, Sue, which on the Bernina means it pauses when you stop stitching, or when you stop moving, it stops stitching. I use that for the ruler work, so I just left it on. Yeah. Jen, tuning in late, but it looks wonderful and the new lighting is awesome. Great. Madge, dear Susan, be kind and gentle with yourself like you are with others. I have a rule that I can't critique as I quilt as it steals my wonderful creativity. Just keep going, echo, and let it flow. Such good advice, Madge. So important to remember when you're trying something new, right? Just, yeah, be kind with yourself. I'll try and do the same thing. Wendy, you've got to start somewhere, if I may. My new quilting mantra. Yep, great. So good. Sally, beautiful. What courage you have to do that on a live feed. I'd have a nervous breakdown. Love watching you quilt. So funny thing, Sally, many quilters are also promoters of doodling a lot and establishing that muscle memory. That's kind of never been my way. I did get my plexiglass sheet and I have practiced a few times. I had this drawn out to scale and I was practicing putting different things in and different elements in placement. But I quilt far more easily than I draw. So once I had generally established my thread path for the rows, then I just start quilting it. And I have quilted these before in weeks past, but for me, that's what works. I think it's important that you figure out what works for you. If drawing gets it nailed in there, good. If quilting does it, like it does for me, do it that way. There's no wrong way. Joan, glad you're showing something new to you, but I will never be able to do this because my machine is only one speed, not regulated. Well, I wouldn't say that, Joan, because I know there are quilters who do this with one speed. Tracy of Whirls and Swirls Quilting for years did a ton of quilting with just non-regulated speed, and she did all kinds of artistic stuff. I think the ease of it comes with doing a lot of it. So, but I'll just put my 2 cents in there. Okay, that's it. Okay, let me get one more sip of coffee. And I have a story for you guys while I am basting this down. So last week while I was traveling, it was not actually for work or anything to do with quilting. I was visiting family, and my family comes from Southern Ontario. And so I was visiting, in particular, my 87-year-old aunt. So since I was going by myself, when I booked my car rental, I booked a mystery car, which, as far as I know, just means you don't know what you're going to get. And I thought, that'll be fine. It doesn't matter how tiny or cramped it is. There's just me and my little suitcase. Well, when I got to the car rental agency, she said, oh, here, would you like a Camaro? So I said, okay. Anyway, I picked up my 87-year-old aunt, and Mr. Producer is going to show you a photo of us out and about in my sporty car. So it was a fun few days. This aunt, by the way, is very dear to my heart. I've told you, regular viewers, before. My mom passed away quite a few years ago when I was in my 20s. And this is her sister, so she's kind of my one connection to my mom. Alrighty, what else do I need? I need my ruler. Where have I set that down? There we go. Sometimes I feel like I need a personal assistant when I'm doing this, just to, you know, keep me on track. This time I will remember my magnets. So I think what we're going to do, I was not sure how quickly the quilting would go. But Dave and I do have another trip to make this afternoon. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish this next 3 stripe, if you will, and let you have a look at some of the details of that, and then we're going to call it a day for today. There's going to be several more stripes yet until I get to the bottom, and of course remember I've got to finish that top end as well. So over the weekend I'll be finishing this up, so in a few days time watch on social media and I'll show some photographs of the whole thing completed. I'll wash out all the blue markings and all of that so you can get a good look at it. So this will be your last major opportunity to feed in some questions. Boy, I didn't get my ruler lined up very well on the line there, did I? I'm going to have a little bit of fudging to do. I'm going to give you a tiny tip that I learned from Judy Madsen years ago that comes into play when I'm doing these 1/4 inch echoes. When you want something to be really accurately spaced, it works better, it really does, if you mark it first. So most rulers will have 1/4 inch markings on them, so you certainly can just use the marking on the ruler to indicate where to stitch 1/4 inch away. But my experience is if I want a really nice, even 1/4 inch echo, I mark that 1/4 inch echo. So I said earlier that I don't generally pre-mark these quilts, and that is true. But this is one place, like as I'm working down it, I will often do that. The stripes that are further apart, I don't fiddle so much with because it doesn't seem to matter as much. But when you're doing small things, closely spaced things, pre-marking them just helps it to be more accurate. And if you don't know Judy Madsen, she is a incredibly detailed custom quilter, a ton of ruler work. So she knows what she's talking about when it comes to making your ruler work look precise. And now I'm coming to the one where I did not stitch accurately on the line. So in this case, I am going to use my ruler marking for this one. Because if you don't get the first one on the line, doing the second one on the line is not going to fix it, is it? So in case you are coming in late, I'm going to mention a couple things that I did to pre-mark this quilt. First off, for the placement of these chevrons, I planned it out in advance. So my quilt, it's one with the fabric, but I cut it to 42 inches so that I would have 6 evenly sized chevron areas. They're 7 inches apiece, obviously. So up, down, up, down, up, down. 6 works really nice. To mark the placement of those, to keep them even, I simply, first I put ruler dots at those 7-inch increments, and then I used a long ruler, and I used a dressmaker's tracing wheel with my quilt top on top of a piece of batting, so a little bit of softness under it. And I traced those long lines, so they're not actually drawn, they're just a simple crease from that tracing wheel. It's the type of tracing wheel that is smooth, not the perforated kind. So just a smooth wheel, a Hera marker, even honestly a plastic kitchen knife that does not have serration would do it too. So running top to bottom in my chevron points, I just have that gentle crease, which I'm sure you guys can't see on camera, which is why I keep telling you about it, because it is there and I can see it, and it's helping me to make these points nice and sharp. When I do these chevron quilts, I do not always mark all the lines in like I did on this one. But because I wanted this floral focal point in the center of it, I began my marking in the center, planned where I wanted that big floral strip to go, and then I worked, outwards from that. And I went ahead and marked in all the lines because I knew I'd be talking to you guys, and therefore I might be distracted and, forget to put in a 1/4 inch echo or something like that. So having it drawn in just keeps me on track when there is some distraction. But I don't always draw in all of those lines in advance. And this grouping of 3 repeats over and over throughout the quilt top. Each of the stripes is about 1 inch wide. And I'm doing this simple scallop in the top and bottom one. And then I'll do something much tighter in the middle one, and it gives a lovely textural contrast. This is a grouping you've probably seen me use before. I do like it. It's successful, so I keep using it, but I have fiddled with others too. And these whole cloth quilts have become just a kind of a staple for me for baby gifts. And I believe this is the 5th one I'm doing on YouTube, so I try to put whole cloth in the title of every one of them. So though they're different each time, you can find them by searching for whole cloth on my channel. The last one that I did was much more of a sampler of border designs. So because they're small, you're just going across one width. It's a great way to try out some new designs. It is a fabulous way to create a baby gift. What else? If you're coming in new, I'm stitching on a Bernina Q24. Her name is Stella. She's pretty much a member of the family. She has a great sense of humor. I'm using Isocord 100% polyester thread, and I have the same thread in the top and the bobbin. And generally, I stitch my quilts on with 10 stitches per inch. And I've just remembered that I bumped that up to 12 when I was doing those teeny tiny flowers to keep the edges, the corners nice and round and not sort of squared off looking. So I realize I still have 12 turned on, and it's very, very tiny. But I'm going to go ahead and finish this grouping of stripes before I change it, just so it's not visible where I made the change. So this will be the last grouping for today. I will be happy to take some more questions before I go. And if you missed the earlier part about the loading, I was talking about using a pieced backing, about how to plan to make sure that your quilt falls on that piece backing or gets placed on that piece backing exactly where you want it to lie. And I was talking about the floral and how I drew my quilting inspiration directly from the Bonnie and Camille rosy floral that is the backing of this quilt. So all of that was at the very beginning of the show. If you're enjoying this type of content, please hit like and subscribe. YouTube can then notify you whenever I send new episodes out, and also on my newsletter. If you're not signed up for that, you should, because I do post a photograph of what I'm going to be working on and let you know when these live and unscripted episodes are coming up, as well as any other things that are new and upcoming in the studio. You can do that just by going to my website, stitchedbysusan.com. I am a social media user, so you will see photographs of this project and many others on Instagram and Facebook. So if you want to see the finished project, that's a great place to look. And eventually, when it is done, I will take a finished photo and it will become the thumbnail for this video as well. What you're seeing now is just the fabrics as you entered the episode today. And in the description of my episodes, I always include links to some of my favorite tools that I'm using throughout the episode. That will happen when it uploads to YouTube permanently after the live show is over. So yeah, these live and unscripted shows I try and do about twice a month. And I really hope, I get feedback from all of you, so I know they are just so beneficial to see the thing being done in real time. And today you got to see me trying out something really new. And it was really fun. All right. Let me get my magic elixir again. My beautiful mug. Okay, have we got any questions coming in? I'm going to move Stella and my red solo cup. The red solo cups, by the way, are my thread snippy receptacle. Bobby, where did you find the plexiglass sheets? We got them at our local hardware store. Sorry, Dave? Mr. Producer says he put a link in the chat, but your local hardware store will often have them, and I have them in 12 by 18 inches, which you can usually find pre-cut. Susan, what are you doing between the triple chevron spaces that you skipped over? They're going to be exactly the same. I'm just going to go back up there and do them. So all those triples will look the same throughout the quilt. Dorothy, on only 3 whole cloth quilts come up on a YouTube search. Do you have other search suggestions? I don't at the moment, Dorothy, but I'll try and make a mental note to go back and look at those titles. You know, at the beginning, I probably didn't intend for it to be a series, so I'll go back and possibly edit those titles so they all do say whole cloth to make that possible for you to find. Live and Unscripted is also a channel. Sorry, that's not right. It's a playlist on my channel There's a lot of them, but they would all be in that playlist. So that's one way to find it. But I'll try and go rename them better for you. Jen, I just found a new method of doodling. Rather than paper, I bought an LCD screen type of writing tablet that I can instantly erase and start over, hoping it will help me build my muscle memory. That's a great idea, Jen. I do recommend that you try and do it in real size. That's the beauty of having something big, is that you're doing it in the proper size and you're getting the arm movement and not just the finger movement. So think about that in the tool that you're using too. But absolutely worth a try. Colette quilting at the lake. Ooh, that sounds nice. I usually listen to music while long arming, but like to change it up and binge listen to YouTube. You're my first place to check when I have one of those days. Fantastic. And I mentioned earlier, but I'll mention again, I do have a podcast called Measure Twice, Cut Once. Got to get that right because it matters, doesn't it? And I'm in the process of uploading all those episodes onto YouTube so that you can listen to them from within YouTube, and they're all captioned as well. So on my same channel, just look for the podcast playlist. Angela, I love it. Thanks for being brave and showing us a first attempt. You're absolutely welcome. That's kind of what this show is all about. Being brave. Okay, you guys, I am going to pack it up for today. Dave and I are going for a drive this afternoon to visit my parents, so we're off and out of here in about a half an hour's time. Thanks a ton for joining us. He's telling me something else. What are you asking me, babe? Oh, apparently there's one more comment. Jen, yes, the LCD screen I bought is 22 inches, so it's sized to enable actual sizing practice. That's so great, Jen. That's awesome. If you have a moment, maybe put a link in the comments. Maybe others would like to give that a try, and I might pick up that link as well. I think that sounds really interesting. I did not know about that, so that's great. Bobby, when you practice doodling, what size space do you use to doodle in? Most often, I'm on my plexi sheets that are 12 by 18. The only time I doodle smaller on paper is when I'm literally trying to work on a new design and work out my thread path, like where would I go next, because that works in any size. But when I'm trying to establish muscle memory, it's always the bigger one. Mr. Producer's trying to tell me something. Oh, yes, correction. I said the plexi was 12 by 18. That's wrong. It's 18 by 24. Let me show you one. See, here it is. It's quite big, but small enough that I can, in fact, lay it and rest it down on my quilt, not so heavy that I, can lay it on there to practice on. This is really key too. I've got duct tape around the border of it, and always that is facing upwards, so I can't accidentally draw off the edge, and also so that any marker residue is always on this side, and I never, ever, ever flip it over. There's a top side and a bottom side for sure. So that's important when you're working on your quilts. And I just use dry erase markers and a batting scrap for an eraser. And I keep 3 or 4 of them always on hand. They're super, super helpful for any number of things. So thank you so much for joining me. Once again, this is Live and Unscripted. We generally air twice a month. So like and subscribe to the channel so that you get notifications when we're coming live next. Sign up for my newsletter so you can find out what the episode is about a couple days in advance. That can be done at my website, stitchedbysusan.com. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to sew with you, and I will see you next time.